the various tropes of society, whether in India or abroad. So to begin with, the topic of my talk is defining femaleness and female sexuality in Gloria Naylor's Cafe. Seattle Times, Gloria Naylor discusses the novel's original conception as a book about prostitutes. Women have been cast in sexual roles since Eve, Adam and Eve. And this changed over time, but she claims the main theme is still the same. How people define femaleness and female sexuality, that really matter. This is evident in Eve's boarding house for fugitive women, one of the characters, in female characters in Belize Cafe, for fugitive woman, which also serves as a brothel. And the story of Sally, she's also a destitute who falls to become a prostitute at a young age, deals with alcoholism and being ejected from a homeless shelter. Mariam Mary, a pregnant virgin who is victim of genital mutilation, and other characters like Esther and Jezebel who deal with sexual and emotional abuse, drug use, and other issues with regard to sexuality and gender. So Gelor is absolutely correct when she talks about the refined name of prostitution even in the present is. Although Belize Cafe begins in a realistic manner, the novel by Gloria Delillo, it soon takes on the qualities of magical realism. For example, the cafe is not really a cafe. In critical terms, it is the governing metaphor of the novel. In metaphysical terms, it represents a state of the human soul. As Berger, the owner of the cafe, says, it is a place people go when they are hanging on to the edge. Therefore, the cafe appears only to people who are desperate, destitute, who have endured so much pain that they think they cannot go on living. So Gloria Naylor, however, offers in her writings an ambivalent portrayal of Black women that shifts the focus regarding oppression from the white patriarchal society to the women's families and communities. In a fourth novel, Belize Cafe, this is the fourth novel written by Naylor, female and its reception within the Black women's communities becomes four characters and plot. So the novel, set in the jazz and blues milieu, deals with the various ways women respond to sexual relations and manipulate their own sexual identities. By rereading and reinterpreting master narratives, Naylor takes on the complex negotiation of common-centric interpretation of female figure in the scripture, questioning in particular the concept of sacrifice and consequent victimization attributed for forgotten matriarch. So in Belize Cafe, Gloria Naylor models are female characters on a number of biblical archetypes, connecting their stories through the central characters runs something of a brothel, boarding house, in which women find from their broken lives. The woman's story featured a variety of female sexuality, from forced prostitution to abortion, from the motherhood to the Immaculate Conception. Sociologist Patricia Hill Collins asserts that commonly accepted modern day notions about Black women's sexuality were shaped through centuries of operation and slavery that echoed the biblical portrayal of women like Hagar as submissive objects of their master's sexual harassment. Now, quote, one key feature about the treatment of Black women was how their bodies were objects of display. A chilling example of this objectification of the Black female body is provided by the exhibition in early 19th century Europe of Sarah Bachman, the so-called Hottentot Venus. She's a famous figure in Black woman history, Sarah Bachman. An African woman, Sarah Bachman, was often exhibited at fashionable parties in Paris, generally wearing little clothing to provide entertainment. To her audience, she represented deviant sexuality. In America, too, being a Black woman, being in a Black woman's body was right from the beginning on never viewed as normal, as Michael Bennett and Benza D. Dickerson states. Basic to identity, self-image, and being in the physical world is the body, a source conflict for a Black woman whose ownership of its beauty, pleasure, and potential has been complicated when it has not been denied. Decried as unnatural, ugly, bestial, and feminine, the Black female's person was excluded. From the 19th century of true womanhood, later still romanticized as the strong body of superwoman, Black female body was yet again dehumanized as a machine built for endurance, little else. In short, historically and socially, the Black female body tends to be defined and viewed as the antithesis of the good, the true, and the beautiful. Demonized, based, raped, dismissed. No other body in the United States has been so materially, discursively humbled. As a result of the legacy of slavery and against the backdrop of a religious tradition that systematically devalued women, Black women's sexuality has been structured around a very narrow spectrum of archetypal image that Patricia Collins defined as ranging from the mammy, the matriarch, to the Black lady and the bad girl and Jezebel. Now, in order to question these popular portrayals of women, Lenore presents her characters not as broken, but primarily as having clearly been silenced. A silence that, without explanation, embellies staffing. Gloria Lenore revisits, quite literally, female sexuality and stresses the importance of celebrating femininity and sexuality in all shapes and sizes as our female characters become pilots that allow for redemption and change. Now, these socially constructed images of Black women are, by definition, structures, as Julia Jordan Zazary points out, once slavery initiated instruction of Black women as the polar opposite of the good woman, the construction of the embodiment of this good woman against instruction of Black women become meaningful. And here, I would like to quote by Gloria Delor. I am a black female writer, and I have no qualms whatsoever with people saying that I am a black female writer. What I take umbrage with is the fact that some might try to use that identity, that which is me, as a way to ghettoize my material and my output. I am female and black and American. No buts are in that identity. Now, you go off and do the work to somehow broaden yourself so you understand what America is really about because it is about me. And I like this quote given by Gloria Nelor very much. And I think that this quotation is very, very apt to the present context when I'm going to present the femaleness and sexuality in Belly's Cafe. Now, these are the words from Gloria Nelor in the previous series on the African American culture. I will make me a word. And that's why she celebrated this black woman's sexuality in that way. And it can readily conclude some her dismay at the marginalization of black literature by America's mainstream. So there are very few writers who have the same guts or courage, like Nelor, to make the culture of black America live on the pages of human history. Now, as educational opportunity expanded among African Americans after the war, a self-conscious black middle class with serious literary ambitions emerged in later 19th century. So their challenge lay in reconciling the gentler style and sentimental tone of much popular American literature, which middle-class black writers often imitated to a real world socio-political agenda that after the amendment of Reconstruction in the South obliged African American writers to argue the case for racial justice to an increasingly indifferent white audience. Well, her first novel, The Women of Bristol Place, novel of 7 stories, so is very scary. And the novel is actually a cycle of interconnected stories of, women of different backgrounds, suffering from the pangs of misery, and somehow or other, staying in Bristol Place, cutting from the society, the main social, strand, and supporting each other. So this novel really is a celebrated novel for Gloria Nelor. It came out in 1982. And speaking a lot about the black woman situation. And in this place, despite their differences, all of them are united by their inability to fulfill dreams deferred by racism, mostly, suffering from sexual exploitation, racism and sexism. So the women of Bristol Place won the Women Book Award for the best first novel in 1980. The second novel, Linden Hill, written by Gloria Nelor, is a very unique one because this is her personal experience that she was forced to write this novel when she realized that as a single woman traveling alone, she found herself approached often by men and began to resent the fact that she did not have the freedom to explore enjoyed by male writers, white and black. So she decided to shut herself up in the boarding house in Cadiz and began to write Linton Hills, which came out in 1985. So the initial idea for this novel was influenced by the reading of, Inferno in great literature by at Brooklyn. And Linton Hills is an African American middle class, neighborhood pattern after the geography of Dante's head. Dante's head. She imbibed whatever she wrote there from this. So two younger poets outsider in Linton Hills, who are looking for the world the week before Christmas, discover the neuroses and crimes of the bourgeois inhabitants who have relinquished culture and values for material gain. Then Nanor's third novel, Mamadou, came out in 1988, and the setting is New York City. And an island off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, whose most powerful inhabitant is Miranda, Mama Day, killer and magician. So when Mama Day's beloved Miss Polka brings her husband George to visit, they all become involved in plot to save Polka from Beverly Hills. Delors examined, explained, explored the conflicts between men and women. And like other novels, here also, that are, reverberates with the influence of traditional literature this time, that is Shakespeare the Tempest. So, sketching the lives of host of bizarre character, Belly Cafe, focuses on issues of marginality. And each of the characters, while visiting the title setting, is in transition, having barely escaped lives of not so quite desperation in hopes of gaining direction and purpose. So, the unifying connecting thread is the narrative voice of Belly himself, who is the owner of Belly Cafe, the present manager of the cafe, who, after relating his own trying tale, introduces the reader to various patrons whose individual life histories constitute the different chapter division. Now, it is appropriately set in 1948, significant transition age, World War II, civil rights movement, Supreme Court ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, which maintained school integration. And like these characters, the country is, to some degree, in limbo, having also shared its innocence in throes of global war, while yet uncertain about its ability or even willingness to move forward, particularly in regard to racial issues. So in this novel, Delors offers a chance for both the country and her character to mature and realize their utmost potential. As I said, that with the theme of femaleness and sexuality, I'm applying to also Berger, yet another pioneer female critics, black female critics, Berger, from margin to center, from margin to center. This is a critical theory by Delors. So Delors begins the preface of her benchmark book, Feminist Theory, from margin to center. That is, to be in the margin is to be part of the whole, but outside the main body. Try to understand it. And that is why Delors said that she's proud to be a black woman. And she considers herself as a world. I am a world. So to be in the margin is to be part of the whole, but outside the main body. And this is the crux of this critical theory, which is from margin to center. Now, this statement comprises of the whole lot of black feminist theory, which bears the marginality in the overall discourse of feminism as a genre. Though black feminism is a part of mainstream, feminist discourse, it has been pushed into the margin because of its peculiar but crucial issues of race and class. So, black female writers have contributed to the separation of black feminism from the mainstream of white feminism by portraying such characters that they are constantly used to question the issues and strategies of white feminism by putting them into a context of racial and class conflict in order to make them realize the importance of margin to center. This is the significance of this critical theory from margin to the center by Berger. The works of Gloria Nelor are quite relevant in this tradition as she carefully chooses her characters from the edge of the world, where they have to constantly struggle to support themselves and one another to survival in a racial, communal, and sexist world. The present talk, I mean, in this talk or in this paper, you can say, I have tried to make an in-depth analysis of Gloria Nelor's Delhi's Cafe and try to assess how this novel makes a shift from and resistance against mainstream white feminist culture. It also explores as how racial and class conflict present in the society further aggravates their problem. So this is the basic, idea I have written in this paper. Karen Spencer, in her article, says, Gloria Nelor's poetics of emancipation defends Nalo from the allegation leveled against her as disparaging representation of black male characters. Reliance on Western cultural narratives, even valorization of Western literary canon. And Karen finds Nalo Valley's Cafe as destabilizing absolute ontological boundaries defined by genre, gender politics, class, and cultural / literary tradition. Thus, she transcended from what Henry Louis Gates Jr. has called discursive invention. Karen also points out that in a revision of Judeo-Christian mythic discourse, Delors modifies the contents and the scope, infusing it with feminist and African American significance. It's an example of the character of Esther presented in Valley's Cafe. I know who is her, whose beauty gains her permission to speak and to act. Nelor's charcoal ugly Esther finds herself in a dark, silent, paralysis sealed by betrayal and complicity. So these characters like Eve, Esther, Mariam, Nadine, mostly taken from, the religious background or sacred writing. So in her article entitled Africana Womanist Revision in Gloria Nelor's Mama Day and Valley's Cafe, Dorothy Perry Thompson points that there are critics who find Nelor constantly referring to Western literary classics such as Chaucer and Shakespeare, and using Western literary theory such as Derrida, which the critics trace had come from her education in Western academia. However, Dorothy claims Miller presents discursive practices of an other culture. And since as gendered ideology that does not separate itself from that culture, her approach cannot be simply termed as feminist. So comparing Delors' novel with Walker and Morrison, Dorothy proves that her approach is more womanist than these two writers, as Renaud's Mama Day and Berry's Cafe contains such element in ancestor, goddess of African element as the ancestor, African tradition, necromancy, ritual is spiritual exploration, investigation, communalism, and genuine celebration of culture, along with discursive, strategic elements as multiple voice narration, conflation of temporal and spatial realities, linguistic appropriateness, and matri-centered focus. What is common in both these commented on Gloria Neros that they want to indicate that a different approach altogether is required to understand Gloria Nelor as a Black feminist writer. Continuing the tradition, I'm going to explore the peculiar life of 7 Black women portrayed in Nelor's Belly's Cafe to assert the need of a different kind of feminist approach to understand and analyze the lives of Black women rather than relying upon mainstream white feminist discourse. It also faults the white feminism for being narrow to the extent as not being able to penetrate into the discourse of Black women's concern. And that is why in the morning I referred to transnational feminism. And transnational feminism occurred due to this. Feminists in USA and feminists in India, they have different approach because they have different setting of the society. So the novel appears to be revolutionary in the sense that it puts the Black woman at the center of feminist discourse who have previously been pushed into the margin in the mainstream, white feminism discourse, and that marks the Black woman's move from margin to center. And see, I mean, we were discussing subaltern also. And that we Spivak says subaltern cannot speak. But she has also said that they can speak when they will be given chance. You know, the post-colonial literature, when it comes up, so subaltern cannot speak, but they can speak in a particular scenario. So that is why we need a special kind of, approach to Nador's novel. Now, Montgomery says the liberation Nador's fictionalizes is to be global in its scope and will include men and women worldwide. Delor's text imply that routine text tasks such as cooking, cleaning, and mothering can be means of furthering the cause of freedom, and her novels chronicle an expansion of her artistic and political vision as women move without moving from margin to central unquote. Now, in this passage, Montgomery demonstrates Neller's commitment of the assertiveness of Black women's work as a means of survival and resistance in the white patriarchal society of America, which brings these women from margin to center without letting them move from their domestic estates. Now, in the United States, the mainstream feminism is identified with the movement defined by white, middle class, college-educated women. That is why I always add everywhere whenever I discuss transnational feminism. Description given by them, the white women. Now, Betty Friedan's feminist mistake is often cited as the first book of this second wave feminism. And this book expresses the frustration, exclusion of white middle class women from the position of power and privilege occupied by white males in American society. This book also gained sympathy of the women who were the victims of sexism within their family and personal lives. Double margin. The agenda that Friday proposed is to eliminate sexist operation imposed by the patriarchal society, which would in turn end the discrimination against women on the job, in the home, and in all areas of women's lives. Equality of opportunity was the objective and sexism was the enemy. So for a number of reasons, Black women did not see this as addressing their concern. They want to speak themselves. Consequently, a number of critics reacted against it. For instance, Frances Bell, in her essay, Double Jeopardy to be Black and Female, 1970, this came out in 1970, criticized white women's movement for its limited focus. She says, any white group that does not have an anti-imperialist and anti-racist ideology has absolutely nothing in common with the Black woman's struggle. Baldwin, as one of the most eminent and articulate spokesperson of Black feminist thought, has pointed out that Black feminists are concerned about economic survival and ethnic and racial discrimination as well as sexism. And she faults the mainstream white women's movement for failing to speak to those issues. Now, speaking of the movement, Bell says, white women who dominates feminist discourse, who for the most part make and articulate feminist theory, have little or no understanding of white supremacy as a racial politics, of the psychological impact of class, of their political belief, a racist, sexist, and capitalist state. Another reason for Black women not joining the white feminist movement was that they find Black men closer to them in identity, in spite of their sexist behaviors, in opposition to white women. And these men stand beside her in their struggle against racism. Now, Black women were of the opinion that the class differences were greater than difference between the sexes within the same class. So historically, since the days of slavery, the white woman, sometimes even more than the white men, has been responsible for the mainstream of Black women, thus to find herself in competition with white women for the only men usually available to her as partner, severely damage any fragile chance for a relationship of trust and mutual understanding between Black and white feminists. Thus, in an effort to meet the needs of Black women who felt they were being racially oppressed, in the women's movement and sexually oppressed, in the Black liberation movement, in Black feminist movement was formed. Alice Walker has coined a new term, womanism. In the morning, our great professor was talking about womanism to address Black feminism in her collection of essays in search of our mother's garden, a womanist prose, 1983, and it states that a Black feminist, as womanist, talks back to feminism, brings new demands and different perspectives to feminism, and complete the expansion of feminist horizon in theory and practice. The term further provides a voice to a large number of African American women who have been trying to define themselves outside the white dominated feminist movement. So, Patrick Collins defined Black feminism in Black Feminist Thought 1991 as including women who theorize the experiences and ideas shared by ordinary Black women that provide a unique angle of vision on self, community, and society. Now, during 1970s and 80s, there emerged a plethora of African American women writers who dared to write about the topics that were taboo and constructed such characters, themes, plots that are often untouchable for mainstream writers. And in their writings, generally a Black. Okay, I'm just trying to conclude. Well, Dorian Lenore is a distinguished Black woman writer who emerged on literary scene because of this only, and with this award-winning novel, The Women of Bristol Place, where she gave voice to each and every woman, each and every woman. She tries to define the position, their suffering, in her own words, and trying to connect one with the other. Her character is further marked by her resistance against patriarchal authority, which is evident in her efforts to control her sexuality and setting up boarding house for the woman torn apart by racial and gender discrimination against all groups. The character Esther, who is there in the Welly's Cafe, she's full of hatred, which stems from the commodification of Black women within the context of rural economic system. She is subjected to the sexual exploitation. And at each place, that is a brothel, you can see, or a boarding house, at each place, she has certain conditions. Men must only visit in the dark. And they must bring me the white roses, see the binary opposition, and they must call me little sister, or I no longer come. What a biting attack. And she is empowered within the arena of her life experience. Even after coming to Eve's boarding house, she continues doing the same. Okay, I'm coming to that. Very difficult, all of a sudden. So, towards the end of the my talk, I won't say discussion, my talk, I would say that she has, in Gloria Lenore, not only in various cafes, in most of her novels, she has presented beautifully the characters with an imaginative place, as if rescuing them from the mainstream, and that is why I applied the critical theory from margin to center. Not being the part of the center, but even in the margin become a central part. So with these, I would like to wrap up my talk by giving my sincere thanks to all who are sitting here, maybe waiting for the lunch, and I can imagine how painful it is to listen, forcefully. Huh? Okay, or honorable speakers, online participants. Okay. Okay, so my sincere thanks to the online participants and listener also. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shah, for this very, very erudite and scholarly lecture defining female and female sexuality in rural and I'm talking about marginality and centrality. In fact, I have a book which I published in 2009 of same name, Marching to Center. There were so many important things that the participants would definitely like to take home. Dr. Charles spoke about womanism, spoke about Judeo-Christian literary culture and Africanist womanist culture. It is so important that the portrayal of women in Baby Steppe, the 7 women that Professor Chan was talking about, she was talking about the peculiar life of these 7 Black women in Baby Steppe, which is definitely a forerunner to Toni Morrison's Paradise, which again concentrates on women, Black women. So she was talking about subalternism. She was talking about Gayatri Spivak's Canvas Subaltern Speech, and she has rightly positioned and she has rightly said that Dorian Naylor has definitely proved that women, the subaltern, the oppressed, the suppressed, do have a voice. And these voices are not only of anxiety, they are not only of suffering, but they are the voices of resistance. She has historicized Black feminism. She has referred in a very scholarly fashion to many, many important African American critics. I'm sure the participants online and offline have a lot to take back home today. Thank you very much for this erudite lecture, Professor Smita Chha. Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Shruti, thank you very much. And I'm sure that this talk of mine may open a number of, writings, research papers, and the research work, because such kind of discussion, we cannot say that it is over. It has to go on and on. And while talking about transnational feminism, it is with this parameter that we have to look further. Recently, whatever is happening in the world, in Afghanistan, I feel tempted to write on that because No theory, nothing, it is just understanding. But with the help of such critics, such writers' point of view, we may get a point of view, focalization to highlight and even in a more vivid, graphic, and meaningful manner. So once again, thank you, online, offline participants, and great scholars with giving me this opportunity. Once again, thank you. Now I would like to request all, now I would like to request all of you for the to paper lunch of the dining hall. Will be after the break, we'll be having plenary talk at 2